Good evening. Hey, I just want to let you know that this session, it will be a continuation of last week's session. As you recall, my video cut out on me, my camera cut out on me, and so I had to show it in two different segments. And so this week is a continuation again of last week's lesson, and this one's going to end abruptly as well. It's just, again, it was a camera issue. But nevertheless, the point I was making when I was closing out this session is simply that history shows that the Roman world acted in a certain way for so many years, and eventually when the polytheistic approach to life was won over by the monotheistic, which is Christianity, that history shows that there was a shift in the power struggle and how each side reacted to each other, and when Christianity became the majority, there were certain people that took advantage of that and used Christianity to their advantage, creating a sense of chaos that followed right after, around the mid-second century, going into the 3rd century. And that's pretty much where I left off, where the video cut out. Anyhow, I hope you learned something from this session, and see you next week. Blessings. Perspectives of the same event with two different ideas and two different thoughts. Now, there's a writer by the name of Catherine Nixey, N-I-X-E-Y, and she writes in a recent book that, well, you've heard the term that the spoils goes to the victor. Well, there's also a thought that history also goes to the victors. And the idea behind is that whoever won the battle, whoever won the war, whoever reigns, whoever is in charge, whoever overcame, whoever, you give it what you want. Whoever the winner was, I guess, whoever the winner was of any event in history, that the winner is usually the one that gets to write history. And that is true, has been pretty much true in all of history. The spoils goes to the victor, history goes to the victor. Now, it's not to say that the people that lost never write history, because they do. And and there are writings of all kinds of history from the loser's perspective, if you will. But overwhelmingly, it seems like the winner and the conqueror is the one that gets to write history, and that is most respected, maybe, or validated. I say that to say that over history, from the 1st century, from the church being a small startup, if you will, that as early as 40 BC only had, according to statisticians, only had about 1,000 adherents, growing all the way to about 350 AD, and over half of the population now is Christian. One could literally say that over time, that Christianity prevailed and won over the polytheistic approach to Roman life, right? Christianity, for all intended purposes, won the battle for the hearts and minds of the populace. So much of history has been written from the Christian side because the spoils goes to the victor or the winner. So, what's her name? Catherine Nixey, she writes that Christianity was the historical winner against Roman polytheism. In a nutshell, that's what happened over a 350 year time frame. Is Christianity outlasted, or Christianity from the historical side? Christianity outlasted and eventually prevailed over the polytheistic approach to the Roman life. And she points out that the idea of the widespread persecution of Christians is a product of the church's marketing and recruitment techniques. So what she writes is that much of the persecution that we read about and that we think occurred during much of the 1st and 2nd and 3rd century really comes from two writers, two guys that wrote two documents that was actually, let me retrace my steps. She's not the one that wrote about where the persecution narrative came from. It was another writer. I think his name. I'm trying to find it real quick. I think his name was. It's a long name. Henrik Seinquist or Seinquist. Henrik Seinquist. Seinquist is a novel. Anyway, long story short, he writes that the narrative of Christian persecution actually took place from two authors that early on in the church's life, and the names of the books were Deaths of the Persecutors by Latomus, and he was a Christian professor of Latin, and the Church History of Eusebius, who was a bishop of Caesarea, which is northern modern Israel nowadays. Anyway, these two authors lived in the era of Constantine. And when Constantine became the emperor, he wanted the church history to be written and documented. And so their job, by direction of Constantine, was to chart history of the Christians. And they wrote a history of suffering and persecution. And pretty much glorified the idea of Christian martyr. Being a martyr for your faith. And so it is said that much of the persecution narrative comes from these two authors who used their writings to paint a narrative that rallied Christianity around its cause. And so what ended up happening with Christianity, when you look at the Christian faith right after the Constantine era, it became, I hate to say the word or describe it this way, but it became almost like a militarized effort. I know it sounds bad, doesn't it? But it became almost a militarized effort. So the interesting thing about Roman polytheism is under Roman rule, they were very accepting of all kinds of, I guess you could call it religions. They were patient with it because their primary concern was, and I've said it over and over and over, their primary concern was peace, maintaining law and order and maintaining peace. And so they were pretty tolerant. They were more tolerant if you believed in their gods and you prayed to their gods, because they believed if you didn't pray to the gods and you got their gods mad, that their gods would not shine favor on them. So that was important to them. But they also allowed the Jews to worship Yahweh. They allowed the Zoroastrians to worship their God, their singular God, and they allowed other peoples as well to worship their own gods. They really didn't make a fuss of it, and when they did make a fuss of it, it was in their view when the Christians came into the world. And they started creating this disorder among their communities. And then while the Christians looked at it as persecution, the Romans looked at it as they were taking hold of a cult, of a movement that was disrupting the peace and the law and order of Rome, and they were going to put a stop to it. So that's when you see those three eras of persecution in around 64 to 70 AD, around 250 to 260 AD. in around 303 to 305 AD. Those three came straight from Rome itself. The rest of it was not. It was localized, according to world history or non-biblical history. So I say all that to say that Rome was very tolerant of all kinds of religions when Christianity came into the picture, and pretty much Christianity won the war against Roman polytheism. And what pretty much ended up happening is Christianity became, said a second ago, very militarized. So the interesting part is that while Rome was very tolerant of whether it be Roman gods, Greek gods, whether it be the Jewish God, whether it be the Zoroastrian God, whether it be, you name it, while they were very tolerant, when Christianity came into the picture, Christianity turned out to be the ones that were not very tolerant. Did you get that? Christianity itself became very non-tolerant. So what ended up happening is that that when Christianity ended up taking over the world, they pretty much brought an end to this large tolerant society. And since because what ended up happening is that now when Christianity became in charge, they forced, some people may look at it as evangelizing, but you got to look at history, because they really gave Christianity a bad name. So I just want to make sure I mention that. They gave Christianity, the 350 and on folks, they really gave Christianity a bad name. Because what ended up happening is that Christianity during that time pretty much started forcing people to conform to their faith, to its social, cultural, family practices that fell under the umbrella of Christianity. And what ended up happening is Christianity, in their intolerance, became the persecutor. And they literally started killing people for not being Christians. And even if someone said, hey, I changed my mind, I'm a Christian, they would go and make sure and confirm what you're saying. And if you were lying about being a Christian because underneath in your home, in the closets, you had all this non-Christian polytheistic material, you were killed.